Say my name. I am awake. I am the danger. I am the one who knocks.
Welcome back. Here we are, breaking into Breaking Bad. Today we're breaking into Season 5, Episode 14, Ozymandias. Cabes, do you want to give the guys back home just a kind of recap of what happens in this, just a brief summary, what happens in this episode?
Yeah, I was thinking about how I was going to do the recap on this one, and it's tough because everyone knows this episode. It's one of the hardest episodes to watch. It's such a great episode, though. All the characters just freaking blow it out of the park. Episode where Hank meets his end, and it's just a really, really sad interaction between Hank and Walt, and we see the culmination of Walt's work come to an end, where he wants to sacrifice it all in order to save his brother-in-law Hank, and we see early on that he is unsuccessful with that, and life starts to fall apart all within his family, with Marie, with Jesse, with his partner Todd, and Todd's uncle Jack, and everything collapses. We can that basically was the gist of the whole episode, and we can get into the whole thing, but this one is definitely top three of the whole show, and it's a tough one to watch, being a really big fan every time I watch it. And I actually picked up on something new this time around watching it, which is surprising, but it is something I read that we'll talk about later. But yeah, no, let's dive into this one.
Okay. So we always start with the title, Ozymandias. You know what this is from?
I know you know, just from your background, but just from what I've heard, and then you can break it down even further, is it has to do with the downfall of an empire per se. But I know that you definitely have a better definition of it.
Yeah, well, it's a very famous poem by Percy Bysshe Shelley. And it's exactly that. So it's actually not that long, so I'm just going to read it. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on those lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains, round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." So yeah, it's the fall of an empire, but the contrast he's showing is sort of that of someone who was an emperor and a godlike king in one time and had the world at his command, or so he thought, and now he's nothing but a half-buried statue in the sand. And that line, "Look on my works and despair," look on what I've done, this mighty thing, and there's just sand around him now. Seems to be a pretty clear, easy connection for us to make with this episode. So I don't know if there's anything else to say.
Yeah, no, I feel like Vince Gilligan really nailed it with the name of this one.
Yep, I agree. All right, so the introduction. We've seen obviously different kinds of introductions, and it's always fun to kind of see what style are they going to do next. And this one's a flashback, and it's an interesting scene. I gotta wonder, how in the world did they film this? It's almost like they had the whole thing planned out, and they filmed this flashback during the first episode, because I don't know how else they would have gotten everything exactly right, but I'm sure Vince Gilligan had his way.
I mean, like with Walt having hair again and them just dress up. No, I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I feel like they did film it when around the same time.
Amazing.
Yeah, no, it was great because it showed the chemistry
Good one.
between Jesse and Walt at an early stage, where we saw them kind of childlike bickering, mostly on Jesse's part, before it flashes forward to present day where they're straight up enemies.
Right. Yeah, it definitely helped us see too, especially rather the development of Jesse's character. He was really immature in the first part of the show, and just the way he talks and the way he acts around Walt, just shows a very different Jesse than the guy that we see now, who has been hardened by all of the experiences and the pain and the fear and the triumphs and the loss and all of that. So it shows them while they're doing their first cook in the RV, and then Walt has to climb up on this hill and call Skylar and come up with some excuse for why he's not home. And when he's on the phone with her, I think this is critical, she says, "Hey, I've been thinking about a name for the baby," which we now remember hasn't been born yet, and all of that. And she says, "What about the name Holly?" which of course is the name we know they go with. And I wonder your take on this. So Walt has this mix of, yeah, I kind of like that, but it's also, it looks like he's just appeasing her because he's trying to make sure she's happy and unassuming so that he can pass off his story. Do you think he is genuine in his appreciation of the name? What do you think?
I think he was happy that he didn't have to try hard to convince her otherwise, because he was trying what do I say? Bogdan's got a bug up his butt, a stick up his butt. He was trying to think of all these things, and then she made it really easy. Like, oh, that's fine. I still got things to do. I don't feel like making dinner. Do you want to pick up a pizza? Yeah, that's a great idea. I'll pick up a pizza. And so when she says that, about the name for Holly, I think he was more at least 70% relieved that he didn't have to really work at his fake response. But at the same time, it probably put him in a position where he was actually kind of happy with that name.
Yeah. I wasn't convinced personally. He seemed not at all to even really notice, and kind of used it as an opportunity, like you said, to get her mind off of things, which is kind of sad. But, Holly plays a decently prominent role in this episode. And so anyway, that's the intro. And then it fades out, and then it sort of fades back into the exact location where the shootout is happening. And
right,
we get there, and where we left off last time, I was asking you, like, golly, how in the world does Gomi get out of there alive? Yeah. He doesn't actually. He gets shot, which is exactly what you'd expect, because they had so many guns trained on him. So Gomi's out, and Hank's hit in the leg, and he's out of ammunition, and he's trying to get Gomi's gun so that he can fire again, but there's no way he's going to be able to win this battle.
I wish they would have given Gomi some better
like he got to take one guy out or something.
Yeah, just something, or maybe we see the end of him, like a final shot, but to kind of just zoom in on him already dead and not having a final triumph or failure or some kind of moment.
Role. Yeah.
I thought was sad, because Gomi we've seen him since episode 1,
Hmm.
right, in season 1.
Yeah.
So he's been a part of the show for a while, and he did a great job.
Right.
That was definitely sad to see him in that situation. But yeah,
Yep. Gotta like Omi. So then we come to a very intense scene where they find his ID. They learn that he's DEA, and so the logic, everything points to the logic of, okay, we've just got to kill him because we can't leave any evidence or witnesses, and we're going to have to just get rid of the bodies here. And Walt absolutely loses his mind. He freaks out and says, no, you can't do that. And he tells them that, it's my brother-in-law. And that freaks them out even more. Like, how could you not have told us? Like, this is a pretty big deal. And then they say, well, that's even more reason now we've got to kill him. And Walt should honestly be very worried himself at this point if I'm Walt. But Walt is pure Walt. There's no Heisenberg in this scene, from what I can tell.
right.
And he offers to give them his entire treasure trove, $80 million, if they will just let Hank go. And immediately, Todd's uncle starts to consider, and, we do too. And we're kind of wondering, how in the world could that ever work? And it gets at this like dark comic level where Walt is like, tell him, Walt, or tell him, Hank, tell him you won't say anything, and you'll just go on and it'll be fine. Go ahead, like they'll believe you. And it's absurd on its face, but it reminded me. Go ahead.
Sorry,
yeah.
It is absurd. However, if you think back throughout the last 5 seasons, like some 50-some episodes we've watched, we've seen situations where there's no way they're going to get out of. Like, think of the episode where Walt and Jesse are trapped in the RV at the garbage place with Hank outside, and they have to think of a way to get Hank away from them while having Saul call them. So it's plausible, in my opinion, to think there's still a way that Walt can find a way to negotiate, because he's a great negotiator. At least in the last 3 seasons, he has proven that he's been able to work out some kind of deal, whether as a blackmail piece or as a survivor piece or as just like it's good for business. Whether it's with Marie or whether it was with Mike on trying to basically kill off the competition with Gale. We've seen him get out of situations before. So when he says 80 million, it is all yours, and you see Jack kind of think about it, but then Jack obviously goes right to Hank and goes, "What do you say, Fed? What do you think about that?" And then at that point, Hank blew any possibility of the negotiation going further from there.
Well, okay, so maybe you're right, but I think I'd have to think on it more. But my hunch is that every time that Walt has proven himself to be a good, shrewd negotiator, he's really acting as Heisenberg in those moments. This scene, this reminded me of Crazy 8. When he's trying to negotiate with him, and he's like, okay, I don't want to kill him. He's a businessman. Let's make a deal. Let's just convince him not to send his goons after us and kill us when we set him free, because I don't want to have to kill him. And if we can, let's just make a deal. That's what they're thinking. And like the logic of that scene with Crazy 8 is like inevitably points to, no, there is no safe way we can let him go. We have to kill him, or he will kill us, no matter what he says. And then he proves it, right? When he gets that shard of the plate that they discover, and they know we can't trust him, right? But it's the same kind of thing here, where it's sort of flipped in a way, because Hank is not a criminal, but Hank is, he's not going to let go. He's like a snapping turtle, right? Like he's clenched down on this, and he's never going to let up. They can't convince him, even if, there's nothing they could ever he could ever
But
say
I
to
think
convince them that.
it's very, very human of Walt's emotions at this point
Oh yeah, that's right.
to sacrifice everything he has. He was willing to throw away everything he's worked for, literally everything he's worked for, in order to save Hank, which ultimately was his family. And you're right, there was not a shred of Heisenberg in this scene. It is all Walt pleading,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what it was.
Now my guess is, had Gomi not been killed, that they could have theoretically worked out a deal where Walt said, Hank, I'm going to let you arrest me and put me away in prison for the rest of my life.
And forget
And
about
Jack,
these guys.
you take all of my money and you go and leave Hank here. But because they had killed Gomi, there was no getting out of it. In fact, what do they say in the episode? They say, how are we going to explain this? Or this is I think Walt says, I know that this is, this has happened. He says, we have to accept that this has now happened, and we can figure out a way out of it, but there's no getting out of it. Like,
Well, the money was the one thing that Hank needed to prove that Walt was Heisenberg. So he
but even then,
wouldn't have
I
let
think,
Jack take the money. He would have just said, "You know what? I never saw you. Get out of here." And then Jack would have had to leave, and then maybe they could have worked out a deal.
right. But because they'd killed Gomi at that point, there's no way that Hank would have ever said, go ahead and get out of here. I never saw this. I'll just tell them that Walt shot him. Right.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah. They said his partner's dead and he's wearing a bullet. So there's nothing we can do at this point.
Yeah. Right. Which speaks to the good writing of this story in this episode, because from as far as I can tell, every sort of potential loose end is tied up. Every explanation is provided so that the classic line where Hank says, we can figure it. Tell him, Hank, that you'll be quiet. And Hank says, Walt, you're the smartest guy I know, and you can't see that he made up his mind 10 minutes ago.
You're too stupid to see he made up his mind 10 minutes ago. This is one of the best.
Yeah.
One of the best lines ever, and you see it right then in Walt's eyes that he knows he's speaking the truth at that point, and it was just you knew he was dead at that point, and it was such a good scene. It was so sad.
Yeah. But I think Hank sees that there's no way out, right? I mean, it's
right.
It's sort of like when they found the shard of the plate missing, and they knew that Crazy 8 had it, and they knew at that point, okay, well, we're gonna have to kill him now. Like,
and he went out with honor. He's like, I'm
that's right,
Jack Schrader, and you can go F yourself. He
right.
He went out,
courage to the end. He wouldn't beg. Yeah, and it makes you have a lot of respect for Hank, for all of his quirks and his flaws. He's determined to die in a noble way, so he doesn't fail there at the end.
Yep.
So then Todd's uncle and his guys put it together that they can find that 80 million, and they do quite easily. So they get the 80 million anyway, or all but 11 million of it, I guess, which I guess this is a kind of nobility among thieves, where his name is Jack, right?
Jack, yeah, the uncle.
Yeah, where Jack insists on cutting everybody's share by not a small amount to give a whole barrel to Walt. Well, and I'm not sure why they did.
Well, because Todd spoke to him about it, and we don't see the conversation, but he says because I have a lot of respect because what did he say? He goes, I know that my nephew has a lot of respect for you, and he never I never hear the end of this. I'm going to leave you a barrel, but that is kind of like leverage to know, hey, I'm still leaving you something. We're square, right? Because I can't leave unless shake. I know we're square. So here's something, even though the situation turned bad.
It almost seems like he wanted assurance that Walt wouldn't come after them
Yes.
because he knows that Walt has done that kind of thing in the past, but he's always used them to do it. So
Right. 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 But like you said, it's an agreement among thieves where there was that honor that was given, and there was a lot of trust there. That's why he made Walt shake his hand.
yeah, right, right. Yeah. So then I can't figure out what the significance of this next part is where Walt, so then they get Jesse, they pull Jesse out. Oh yeah, I guess we got to talk about this. So Jesse is a pretty pathetic specimen of a human being at this point. He's just freaking out, and they're going to kill him. And then Todd says, "No, let's not. Let's see if we can." And I think at that point, Todd's thinking, "We can get him to work in our lab." I think that's what he's thinking.
That's what you thought of at that point?
No, I mean when later on when they take him to the lab and they chain him up, it seemed like, oh yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. Make him your slave because he knows what to do.
Right.
Because it doesn't make sense. He's like, well, he might have talked to somebody. We should torture him and find out if he.
Right, because he said, listen, he was here with these two DEA agents. We should probably find out what he told them, because if he was with them, then he was working with them. So he knows everything about us, our operation. What if, like he had to have told him something. And we know just from the prior episodes that he did tell them everything. He got on a video camera at Hank's house and told the entire story. And so, and we know just from watching the other episode is that that's true.
Yeah, I guess I'm just skeptical of the prospects of getting actual true confessions from torture. But maybe they were going to give it a try anyway. So they run off. They run off with Jesse, and we don't know what happens. But of course, before they're able to leave, Walt makes a point of telling Jesse, "Oh, by the way, I watched Jane die, and I could have saved her, but I didn't." And you're sort of running through your brain, why on earth would he say that except to just inflict as much pain as possible on Jesse for no reason except to enjoy watching him writhe in pain?
Yes, no, that you're 100% right. And it was because, if you remember, before Jax showed up,
he calls him a coward. Yeah.
Right. But Jesse made the phone call. Jesse was the main reason they were in that situation. Jesse tricked him and manipulated him into this situation and beat him in a game of wits in this one. So he was angry that Jesse beat him in that, put him in that situation. Yeah. And then the fact that got his brother-in-law killed, he was angry. And so, he wanted to see everything that he wanted Jack to do in the first place through.
Yeah, and right. So he betrays Walt, and that's almost worse than anything. And you're right, that caused a lot of pain, and it left Walt thinking, now I'm going to have to disappear my whole family, and my life I'm not going to be able to do the thing I wanted to do, which was to just live out my life with my money and enjoy my family and get away with all of this. And now I can't because of you. And so but what does he do? He reveals not that he, and in that moment, betrayed Jesse, but that he betrayed Jesse ages ago, and that he has always been betraying Jesse since their beginning of their story.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes Jesse, that corrupts every memory that he has with Walt. Any potential good time that they ever shared is now ruined.
Well, ultimately, I think it was ruined once Jesse found out that he poisoned Brock. At that point, he really knew that he was being
but this goes back even further.
It does.
This means,
you're right. No, it does. It does.
'cause
So yeah, you're right. At that point, it solidified the fact that he knew he was just a pawn.
right,
Time.
right. Okay, so they drive off, and I can't figure why do they do this. Walt drives off in his car. The car runs out of gas, and he rolls his barrel for what seems to be miles till he comes to a farmhouse, and then he buys the old beat up truck to drive home. Was that just to sort of show how desperate Walt was in that moment with his money? I mean, he looks pretty pathetic rolling this barrel.
Yeah, I mean,
it was sort of like a ball and chain, you know.
What was his options at that point? He didn't want to leave the money there. He had
no,
to
I know, but my question is, why did Vince Gilligan write that? Like, why not have him just drive his car home? Like, why have him run out of gas so that he roll? Like, what is that? What does that show? What's in that?
I mean, that's a good question because it took up a good, probably like 5 minutes or something of the show. But I got to think that it was just his, even though he's suffered just a loss of a family member and all of his money, pretty much, that this was all he had left, and he was still willing to kind of go forward. And to be honest, I just don't think he thought of any other option. There's either go find a truck, come back and get it, or do what he did. And I think I don't I can't remember, to be honest, because I've seen it and I can't remember if it was just AI or not, but there might be and I have to go back and watch it, but when he's rolling the barrel across the desert, I think they even had his pants from episode 1 from season 1 lying on the ground. Remember when he drove
up? Oh, you're kidding
me. I think I've seen so many like AI videos, and now I've seen it so many times I'm getting messed up, but there might have been where you see it just on the ground as he's rolling it through. So that might have been do it, but I would have to double check because I just can't remember right now. My brain's fogged.
Meanwhile, Marie is visiting Skylar, and the last she's heard is when Hank called her to say, "I've got him. I've got him cuffed, and he's in the car now, and we'll be driving him in soon." So Marie is blissfully unaware of Hank's demise, and she goes with great confidence, to tell Skylar, "It's all over. You might as well tell Walter Jr. And in fact, if you don't, I will." And she takes a kind of moral high ground, and Skylar just collapses and says, "Okay, well, you've got him and you've got us. We are now at your mercy." Mm-hmm. And Skylar knows her only option, if that's true, is to sort of beg for forgiveness or be a I'll say pathetic character, which is to say someone who beckons your pity from Marie. And so they tell Walter Jr. He doesn't believe it. He's horrified, and it's really sad to watch. I mean, I thought the acting was actually a pretty good job on his part.
Yeah, no, he did a good job, and he's kind of in disbelief, and then looks like he walks out of the office, but then we see him and Skylar driving back together.
Yeah. So they go home, and Walt's there, parked with his truck in a driveway, and he's furiously packing and hysterically tells them they have to pack up and because they got to leave. And at this point, of course, Skylar's completely confused because she was convinced that he was under arrest. So how is he no longer under arrest? And then she starts to put it together. Something happened. And she thinks with good reason, you killed Hank.
Right.
And Walt, I think, feels so much guilt for the situation that he doesn't flat out deny it. He says, "No, I tried to save him."
Right.
But he still doesn't come out, no, I promise I didn't kill him. Someone else did, and I tried to save him, and it's not my fault. He knows it's partly his fault that this whole thing has happened. And then this was the real, gut puncher, I thought, when Skylar and then Walter Jr. turn on him. When Skylar grabs the knife and they start to wrestle, and she cuts his hand, and then Walter Jr. calls the cops. At that point, the unthinkable has happened. Walt always thought he could count on having his family, and that was the last thing he wanted to be able to save. And when that happens, he freaks out. And so then he grabs Holly and runs out the door and takes Holly, which seems like a stupid move, a really stupid move. And I can't help but think the only thing he was thinking was, I will continue to have Skylar's attention if I have Holly, and otherwise I won't. She will have to listen to me, and she will have to care about where I am, because otherwise she might not. But I don't know. What did you think?
Yeah, it was such a reaction for him to grab Holly like that. It was like he was fleeing a scene, which he obviously was, but his main goal or drive throughout the whole show has been to provide for his family. And so like him
Right.
grabbing Holly was some kind of justification where here's somebody that I've been working for, that I can continue to provide for, that would maybe appreciate my sacrifices, and it gives me something to work for, because if I just leave on my own, there's nothing to do this for. This was the only reason I was doing this in the first place, and obviously it went to his head. But if he doesn't have that as his core drive, it turned into a reaction. But you're right, it was a very dumb move for him to just grab Holly like that. It's just, I don't know, it was very strange.
Yeah, it's not clear if it was a calculated action where he's like, okay, if I take Holly, then I will be able to maneuver and manipulate Skylar, or if it was a complete, just instinctual, well, I've lost Skylar and Walter Jr., but I can maybe still save Holly, and then that we'll still be a family, and I'll still have a family. And that scene when he's at what is it, like a gas station or something, and changing her diaper, and it's like, wow, Walt, you are in way over your head. There's no way you're going to be able to care for this little girl. And then it's kind of remarkable. The little baby's like a baby, and yet she says, "Mama, mama," like
So
on command.
This was the part that I literally heard just a couple days ago.
Okay.
When they were filming that scene, the baby's actual mother was behind Walt when he was holding her. So she was seeing her mother and was trying to get her. That's why she was saying, "Mama, mama, mama." And they just kept rolling because it was perfect, because they wanted it to show that Walt is over his head, and why did he take Holly? And Walt played it perfectly, and he was just like, right when the baby Holly started saying that, it was perfect. Like, it was just so great. So I thought that was so cool.
Well, definitely hard to convince a baby to say, let's do it one more time from the top. So I believe that just happened serendipitously like that.
Yeah.
So then Walt calls Skylar that night, and she's got cops there. And this was very much a Walt, not Heisenberg moment too, where he seems just completely caught up in resentment and not thinking, of course they're tracking. Of course.
Wait, you didn't think that they were? Okay, so I have a completely different opinion. I think this was definitely Heisenberg. He knew 100% they were watching him. And so he was saying all those things to make Skylar look like she was innocent. That's why he was saying, you never respected what I did. I told you to do those things. I was in charge. You were just a simp that was following orders. The whole point of that phone call was to
get her off the
cops look like she was innocent and not a full-fledged partner, and was coerced into doing something against her will. And you see that when Skylar says, "I'm sorry," because she recognizes that Walt is doing what he's doing on purpose, and that's when he starts crying because he knows that she knows what he's doing at that point, and he knows that he screwed up with everything.
So that's very believable, except for the passion with which Walt gives this whole performance.
Watch
like
it again.
If it's a
Watch it
okay,
again.
I will. Yeah, maybe 13 more times.
But I'm telling you, just watch that part again. And I bet you change your mind.
Okay, well, he plays the part well. He makes himself feel the emotions that he's trying to convey, and wants the cops to believe that he really is saying all that. Because I thought, man, he's just given the whole case away.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, he tells them, they're never going to see Hank again, and he says, "Family or no," and
Totally.
that seemed to, yeah, right, but it sort of seemed a change of course from when he normally says, "We're family." It's sort of like he's saying, or no, like maybe
Right.
I'm not gonna have the family.
Don't cross me.
Right. So then the next scene is him waiting to get picked up by Saul's vacuum cleaner repair guy,
Right.
disappear man, and he disappears on the horizon.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the show.
We got 2 episodes left, and it's nonstop, man. It's going to be good.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for taking this ride with us. We appreciate it. Thanks for sticking with us this whole time. Thanks for sharing and liking. And we look forward to breaking into the next episode of Breaking Bad with you when we turn to the last 2 episodes of the show. Stick around.